Welcome friends. This is a web novel. Imagination is key to enjoy it fully. Please like, subscribe and gives your feedback.
Several days passed since the incident with the cloaks. I had completely abandoned everyone else. I was just slowly rebuilding my army. However, it was obvious that the killer winter was starting to come. The days were getting shorter, with less time to gather resources and longer nights where zombies were plentiful. I gave up on trying to hold Camp A and Camp C due to concerns with manpower. I didn't have anywhere near enough soldiers in order to defend the camps from zombies. In the end, I was forced to reside back in the small camp, Camp B. Resources were getting pretty hard to come by and my minions were also gathering less. I found out that during the day, there were also some zombies which roamed the forest. It seemed even the day didn't guarantee safety. I needed to organize my forces every single night, so I've been severely lacking in sleep. As a result, I've been forced to only sleep during the day while my minions were out gathering resources. It was pretty clear that the conditions were deteriorating at a rapid pace. Some nights, the temperature would fall to a point where I felt as if I'd die if I left my hut. I was able to gather some warm blankets and other items during my raid of the Cloak's main settlement several days prior, but the nights were seriously cold. I've spent most of my energy trying to rebuild my forces, but soon enough, I would need to begin quickly preparing for the harsher days which were to come. Killer winter technically hadn't even started yet. I needed to get things prepared and prepared fast. There was a good chance that my minions wouldn't even be able to go out on expeditions during the peak of killer winter. As a result, I will likely have to make this camp self-sufficient, even in times of extreme weather and conditions. The first main thing I worried about was food. Whilst I was gathering it at a pretty good rate at the moment, as soon as I was unable to go out on expeditions, I was going to run out. Currently, my army of minions was much smaller than it was at its peak. Advanced System Controls. Resource Division, 91 minions. 3x Woodcutter Minion. 11x Miner Minion. 22x Scout Minion, Mining. 25x Scout Minion, Woodcutting. 23x Scout Minion, Resource Gathering. 6x Scout Minion, Hunting. 1x Scout Minion, Farming. Combat Division, 52 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 17x Scout Minions, Swordplay. 22x Scout Minions, Archery. 2x Scout Minion, Combat. 9x Basic Scout Minion. Utility Division, 26 minions. 13x Builder Minion. 10x Scout Minion, Utility. 2x Basic Scout Minion. 1x Minion Manager. I took some pretty big losses during an expedition one day. I was informed by one of my scout minions that there was a horde of zombies sitting in the forest. As a result, I lost a huge chunk of my miner minions. The rate at which I gathered resources had also slowed down quite a bit. However, I figured that this winter was not only harsh on me, but on many other people as well. When I checked the global leaderboards, most of the top-ranking humans have also significantly slowed down their progression rate. It seemed this season was going to be a very tough one. I wanted to start by making a farm. This way, I could keep producing minions without having to send them into danger in the forest. I looked at the crafting recipe for an advanced farm bed. Crafting. Advanced farm bed. Cost, 200 wood, 50 stone, 1 farming crystal. Produces a base of 20 wheat per day when farmed. I was collecting resources at a slower pace, but I was still getting enough to make several farm beds a day. I had also begun training some scout minions in farming in order to make them into farmers. In the past 2 days, I had crafted 6 farm beds. As I was crafting more farm beds, I received another notification. You have leveled up. Level up. Level 8-level 9. Rewards. Unlocked. Simple conversion. More crafting recipes. Inventory space, plus 2,000. Originally, I had intended to sell the wheat I collected and buy things off the Grand Exchange. I hoped that other people might be more inclined to trade on the Grand Exchange since things were beginning to get hard and people had more time to level up. There was a chance that people with some sort of farming system may have been selling things on the Grand Exchange. However, with the new simple conversion menu, I had a backup. Simple conversion. 100 wheat-5 apples. 200 wheat-1 meat. There were several other conversions, but this was the one I was most interested in. Normally, gathering apples and meat was no big deal, but once expeditions were made impossible, it would be extremely difficult to gather those resources. Even if I decided to send my minions off to expeditions during the dangerous period, the cost would likely be far greater than the reward. Still, the conversion rates were not great, so if possible, I'd still like to buy food off of the Grand Exchange. There were now quite a few more trades going on with all of the extra people who were now at a high enough level. A grand exchange. Top items. 1. X1, wood, cost, 500 tokens, seller, Mackenzie Franklin. 2. X2, automatic farming plant, cost 150 tokens, seller, Maya Keller. 3. X5, farming crystal, cost 66 tokens, seller, Maya Keller. 4. X400, meat, cost 62 tokens, seller, Noah Gate. 5. X1, enchanted diamond sword, cost 43 tokens, seller, Radin Sedeganad. There were finally some serious items, but Mackenzie's wood was still number 1 in the exchange. I guess it was due to its price. 2 more days until the beginning of Killer Winter. With only 2 days until Killer Winter, I needed to make my final preparations. I had sent my minions out on their expeditions, however, I was taking some pretty significant casualties. I spent all day reorganizing the camp until the sun began to set. I called my minions back a little earlier than usual due to the fact that the forest was much more dangerous and also because days were much shorter. My minion manager made its way over to me. I've got the end of day report. End of day report. Total resources gathered. X975, wood. X20, leaves. X38, meat. X75, rocks. X1, ultra-hardened stone. X11, iron. X4, gold. Other. X14, scout minions crafted. X2, minion huts built. Just from checking my minions menu, I saw that I had lost 6 minions for various causes just today. As soon as I received my report, I decided to open my crafting menu and build as many advanced farm beds as I could. I needed to be able to gain resources without having to leave my camp. This was the best way to minimize losses and stay safe during the Killer Winter. I was starting to get a decent number of farming scout minions now that I had a few days to begin training them. I immediately put them to use on the farm beds in order to increase their experience. At this point, I would only be able to make small adjustments. Now that the sun had set once again, I ate some food and prepared to defend myself during the night. Zombies were coming at increasingly fast rates and I had the smallest army I'd had since several weeks ago. I didn't have to option to simply sleep through the night anymore. I hoped that once I took care of the main zombie wave, I'd be able to get at least a little bit of sleep. I had been stockpiling tokens for a significant amount of time and my balance stood at around 200. It was quite a large amount which would be able to help me significantly throughout the harsh winter, especially now that many people were using the Grand Exchange. With 4 more advanced farm beds, my total came to 12. This meant that I should be able to collect at least 240 wheat a day with the lowest level farming minions. I estimated that the actual amount I should be able to farm was closer to 300. This still wasn't near enough, however. Just to craft a single scout minion, I would need 5 apples and 2 meat. This meant that I wasn't even producing enough wheat to craft a single scout minion a day using the simple conversion. If I converted those earnings directly into tokens, it would be around 0.3 tokens per day. These numbers were quite problematic, but I still couldn't increase the rate very easily. I could spend all of tomorrow cutting down trees in order to make more advanced farm beds, but even with that, I might only be able to double my current production at most. This Killer Winter was going to be a devastating one. My main hope is my current token balance. With such a large amount of tokens, I would be able to buy things from the Grand Exchange as I needed them. The night had come and zombies were showing their disgusting heads through the dense forest. I organized my minions into a wall and made sure that all of my flanks were covered. I had just barely enough minions to completely cover the border of the camp, however, I wanted to minimize my losses as much as possible. Thus, I put my minions into small groups in order to increase their safety. As a result, zombies regularly make their way through the gaps, forcing me to have to engage them myself. It wasn't a great arrangement, but it was the best at the moment. I drew manhwarecap and prepared to fight off some rotten creatures. My minions were able to hold the line for the most part. Even as the zombies tried to break through, my minion formation managed to hold itself. The horde of zombies clashed with my minions as they appeared from the forest, endless like an ocean. I spread my 3 elites around the area in order to command the other minions in tight situations. Several zombies had already broken through the gaps in the line and were approaching me. I slashed at them with manhwarecap, cutting them down, one by one. However, the number of zombies making their way towards me was only increasing. I concentrated my thoughts and tensed my body as I held manhwarecap in front of me. I held onto the grip as hard as I could. Cut them down, Mayuri. A thick aura gathered around the blade. I swung the sword, sending a blast of air towards the horde. I needed to cut down the density of the groups, so I was forced to use Mayuri's power. It was going to be a struggle once my arms were sore, but I hoped that my minions would be able to hold them off for the most part. I had quite a few archery scout minions now, so my front line was getting at least a little bit of support. A few minutes later, the number of zombies coming out of the forest was steadily decreasing. It seemed tonight wasn't as vicious as the last few. With a little bit of breathing space, I set my minions up to alert me in the case of any major issues. I retreated back into my hut and tried to at least get a little bit of sleep before the next day. I couldn't afford to waste more of my precious daytime sleeping. I needed to gather as many resources as I possibly could before all of my movement was halted due to the killer winter. As I listened to the sound of combat outside, I closed my eyes. I stayed in darkness for a few minutes before finally, I was able to fall asleep. I woke up to a cold, gray day. The sky was filled with dark gray clouds. It was practically impossible to spot the sun through the thick fog of clouds which covered the sky. As a result, the entire area was darker than usual. I couldn't really tell what time it was, but I assumed it was sometime around noon. My minions were out on their various expeditions already. Today was the final day before the true beginning of killer winter. Full of resolve, I pulled out my fine logger's axe, and made my way over to a tree. Plus 21 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 1 coal. I was gathering wood at quite a rapid rate. I needed 200 wood per advanced farm bed, which took around 2 minutes each to gather. I continued to swing away at the tree, slowly chipping away at its trunk and collecting more and more wood. After almost an entire hour of non-stop grinding, I decided to take a seat and rest my arms. The rate at that I gathered wood slowed as I got more lethargic, but in total, I managed to gather enough wood for around 20 advanced farm beds. I decided to craft them while I was resting and place them next to each other in the big row of farm beds that I had created. My settlement at the moment consisted of a fireplace, several wooden huts and a large number of farm beds that were all placed just far enough from each other that minions would be able to go through and collect the crops. After a short break, I made my way back over to the forest and began collecting wood once again. Plus 21 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 1 coal, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood. I was tired due to the lack of sleep I had gotten the previous night. However, I needed to push through the pain in order to gather as many resources as I could before the beginning of killer winter. If I didn't work hard today, I wouldn't be able to make up for the lost time in the future. My arms were getting quite lethargic, but I needed to keep pushing. I tensed my body and continued to swing the axe into the tree, beating into its bark. My inventory was slowly getting filled with more dirt as I powered through, cutting down tree after tree. Another hour later, I had gathered enough wood to craft 18 more advanced farm beds. I fell to the ground and caught my breath. It had been a decent amount of time since I last gathered resources so religiously. However, my stamina had significantly increased since I came here, so I was able to keep going after a small rest. I got back and walked back over to the tree. Holding my fine logger's axe in my hand, I swung with all my strength, cutting into the tree. I was gathering more and more wood. There were only so many more hours in the day, so I needed to work to maximum efficiency. Plus 21 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 1 diamond. Ah, that diamond was beautiful to my eyes. The glimmering gem which entered my inventory was enough to give me another boost of energy. I had almost forgotten that my fine logger's axe had the capacity to sometimes gather a diamond while I was chopping wood. With that new motivation, I pushed my body to its maximum and chopped wood like it was my career. I needed as much as I could get. This was the final day. The final day of preparation before the harshest season of the entire year. If I failed to prepare well enough, I would be as good as dead. Even with all my minions, there was only so much I could do. I imagined that there would likely be a lot of deaths during this time. If worst comes to worst, I might have to sacrifice everything in order to try to last a few days. Whilst my 100 tokens sounded quite comforting at first, who knows what might happen during the killer winter. I needed to make my camp as self-sufficient as possible. Considering that I'd likely lose minions every single night while fighting the zombies, I needed to constantly replace them, otherwise my entire camp would get overrun. I swung my axe, smashing into the tree. Again, the tree tumbled to the ground as I moved on to the next one. I was so tired that I could hardly keep my eyes open. However, I needed to push through. I needed to push with every last piece of energy I had. A few hours later, I looked up and noticed that the sky was starting to dim. It was getting relatively late in the afternoon. However, I had managed to craft almost 100 advanced farm beds with the amount of wood I had gathered. My total had now come to around 110. Based on my calculations, I should be able to gather around 2,800 wheat per day. In terms of minions, it was around 4 to 5 scout minions per day. It was better than before, but I still had my doubts about whether that would really be enough. Even during these relatively easy nights, I was losing several minions every day to zombies. I imagined that if I made all my scout minions into combat ones, I should be able to lose less, as combat ones were stronger than the resource gathering ones, which I also had in my front lines. I needed more though. I couldn't be safe with my current production. However, the night was swiftly coming. I hurried over to a tree and began frantically chopping it down. Plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood. Ah, I need more wood. I need to craft more farm beds. Plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 24 wood, plus 21 wood, plus 23 wood, plus 22 wood, plus 24 wood. It was starting to get really dark. If I don't go back to camp right now, I'll be at high risk of being attacked by zombies. I rushed back to the camp and collapsed to the ground. I'm so tired. Williams passed. You'll protect me, right? A short blonde girl was rolled up in the corner of the room. Her uniform was completely stained by tears and blood. The entire classroom was a mess. Tables, chairs, stationery was all scattered across the ground, broken and cracked. It was a scene of chaos, although not one that I was unfamiliar with. You'll protect me, right? Her gentle plea had become a violent scream. Her usually pretty face was now completely covered by despair and anguish. Her messy hair was strewn all across her face, covering most of her features. Her eyes were darkened from the fear. William, help me. Please. Her hopeless, lifeless eyes begged for a second chance. It wasn't only her body that was bleeding but also her heart. I had had enough, however. There wasn't any more I was willing to do for her. The dire situation she had caused for herself was to be completely her issue. I turned around, slowly making my way towards the exit. William, don't leave me. Tears were flooding down her cheeks at this point. It was the face of true despair. She grabbed at the table legs around her, scrambling to her feet but falling to the ground. She was disconsolate at this point. Any help I could provide her would be more harm than good. My decision to leave hurt me more than anything, but for the good of everyone, I stepped foot outside. I'm sorry, Maisie. I really am. But it's true, I really do hate people like you. Asterisk. It was the morning of another supposedly normal school day. Except obviously, it wasn't. It had been a few days until a parasite latched onto me, its grip however unstable. In the beginning, Maisie was just the girl who talked to me on the bus. I honestly appreciated it. It was the first real interaction with someone outside of the facility. But now, with the classroom in ruins and a girl bloodied and on the ground, I found myself to be the only other person witnessing this horror. It all started a few days ago when I was walking around the sand at the beach. I was by myself as usual. I didn't have many friends at the time. I had always wanted to experience what it felt like to walk along the beach, so with the new minimum amount of newfound freedom, I felt the need to do it firsthand. I noticed another girl walking just a few steps ahead of me. The wind was quite strong and I noticed that her skirt was being swept up. The beach was rather populated at the time, so I decided to quickly make my way over and stood beside her, offering my jumper. I could feel the glances of many of the bystanders, so with the little bit of morality and chivalry I learned at the facility I tried my best to help. Huh? The wind is blowing your skirt. Her face suddenly went red and she quickly grabbed the rim of her skirt, pulling it back down to cover herself up. I bent down a little and tied my jumper onto her hip. It was enough to keep her skirt from fluttering too high and revealing too much. After the aid, she turned to me. Thank you. It honestly wasn't anything. I wasn't looking for a compliment or even social points. It was just driven by pure, it's just the right thing to do. It was the same mechanism which guided me throughout my life until now anyways, being driven into my brain from my time in the facility. I slowed my pace in order to create some room between us. However, as I slowed my walk, she also slowed hers, so we were still walking side by side with each other. So what school do you go to? She asked. Engadin High School? Really? That's the same school I go to. Oh. I don't remember seeing you around though. I only came recently. That makes sense. It was quite an enchanting environment. The two of us walked side by side, as the salty smell of seawater and the bright comforting sun shone upon the glistening water. This was something I really had wanted to experience. We continued our walk, speaking every once in a while but fully embracing the calming aura around us. So what's your name? She asked. William, and yours? It's Hannah. Eventually, we had done almost a complete lap of the entire beach. Time had flown by. It was to the point that the sun was beginning to set, with the clutches of night slowly but surely crawling towards us. Well, it's time for me to go, but I hope to see you at school. Me too. Thank you for helping me today. It's no problem, don't worry about it. She smiled and walked off into the distance. I decided it was about time for me to head back as well. I pulled myself up as I leaned up against the side of the hut. Ah, that was tiring. I managed to craft 2 more, advance farm beds, with the wood that I managed to hurriedly collect before it got too dark. I now had all of my farm beds lined up in rows, filling most of the camp. The farm beds definitely took up the majority of the space, covering the area like miniature urban sprawl. My minion manager made its way to me. I've got the end-of-day report. End-of-day report. Total resources gathered. X1096, wood. X20, leaves. X39, meat. X967, wheat. X111, rocks. X2, ultra-hardened stone. X12, iron. X3, gold. Other. X16, scout minions crafted. X2, minion huts built. It seemed that I gathered slightly more resources than the previous day. Instead of crafting more, advanced farm beds, I decided to just keep all of the resources in my inventory. For the time being, it would be safe to keep at least some on hand in case I needed to craft something urgently. As I looked out towards the forest, I noticed that there were hardly any zombies. It was already quite dark and usually, the zombies would be coming in droves at this time, but for some reason, the forest was mostly empty. I had all of my minions on the lookout, but there was hardly any combat at all. A few zombies made their way onto my settlement, but they were swiftly executed by my minions. Instead of littering the ground as usual, there was only a very scarce spread of zombie corpses. As I watched the night unfold, I decided that I didn't need to stay and watch out. It was likely due to the fact that killer winter starts tomorrow, so the last day is pretty easy in terms of zombie density. I slowly made my way into my hut and took a seat on my bed. I really need a rest. Before I decided to go to sleep, I wanted to check everything again. First, I opened my inventory. Inventory, mining. 109x, iron. 52x, gold. 5x, diamond. 2x, platinum. 76x, rocks. 14x, ultra-hardened stone. I had a decent amount of gems which I could use to craft various things or sell for tokens if it were really necessary. In the past, I had planned to craft a power flux, but from the looks of things, I'm going to have to postpone that. I didn't want to commit too many resources before I completely understand the gravity of the situation. Inventory, miscellaneous. X1, light sphere. X1, fishing rod. X1, enhanced fertilizer. X1, music player. X2, music discs. X94, enhancement agents. I had all the random items I purchased from the wandering trader. I regret it now in hindsight since I might have been able to better use the tokens, but I didn't know about killer winter at that time, so I didn't really realize the need to save tokens. The items might be useful to some degree, so I might look further into them tomorrow. I still didn't know what the enhancement agents were for. From what I could tell, they definitely boosted a person's physical attributes, but I had no idea how to use or equip them, so for the time being they were practically useless. Vegetation/wood. X1208, wood. X100, leaves. X39, meat. X967, wheat. I was somewhat lacking in this department, but I would be able to convert wheat into the necessary resources when the time is right. At the moment, after observing all of my resources, I definitely had enough stored up to last me a decent amount of time. It was just that I lacked information on how difficult killer winter was really going to be. I assumed that I was going to be highly dependent on the Grand Exchange since I won't be able to freely send my minions on expeditions without putting them at high risk. Finally, I wanted to check just how many minions I had. Organization and resource allocation was going to be crucial to survive this killer winter, so I needed to keep track of everything I had. Advanced System Controls. Resource Division, 121 minions. 3x Woodcutter Minion. 11x Miner Minion. 22x Scout Minion, mining. 25x Scout Minion, woodcutting. 33x Scout Minion, resource gathering. 6x Scout Minion, hunting. 1x Scout Minion, farming. 20x Scout Minion. Combat Division, 52 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 20x Scout Minions, swordplay. 22x Scout Minions, archery. 8x Scout Minion, combat. Utility Division, 26 minions. 13x Builder Minion. 10x Scout Minion, utility. 2x Basic Scout Minion. 1x Minion Manager. There was a very high chance that my minion production was going to be quite stagnated. As a result, I needed to use the minions I did have to the highest effect. The best thing I could do at the moment was to continue to train my scout minions, since if I couldn't produce more, I'd simply train them to get better. It was especially important for my combat-based minions since they were going to be practically useless during the daytime if they can't go on expeditions. I wanted to make each individual minion as strong as possible so I didn't have to rely so heavily on numbers. I needed to minimize my losses as much as possible since it would be incredibly difficult for me to replace lost minions. After looking through everything I had, I finally decided to lie down on the soft bed. My entire body was sore, my arms were as stiff as logs and my brain was tired. Let's hope that all the preparations I've made are enough. I didn't have a great deal of time, but if everything goes well, I should be able to survive. I decided to have a quick look at the global rankings since I was curious. I hadn't checked it in a while, especially now that Callum was dead. Global rankings. New Gen Humans. 1. Mackenzie Franklin, 2499. 2. Noah Gate, 1798. 3. Oliver Moran, 1532. 4. Maya Keller, 1292. 5. Radine Sedeganad, 1257. Your rank, number 16. Your estimated progression score, 1021. It seemed that lots of people have also stagnated due to the lead-up to Killer Winter. I worried that I might have dropped ranks after sustaining so many losses, but I guess I was still climbing. After that, I laid my head down on the bed and closed my eyes. Killer Winter has begun. I was awoken by the feeling of my fingers freezing off. Holy shit, why is it so cold? I quickly curled up into a ball and breathed frantically into my hand. Even under the blanket, I could still see the vapor coming out of my mouth. My body was violently shaking, I felt goosebumps all over my skin. I need warmth. The issue was that if I were to start a fire inside this wooden hut, I'd likely burn everything down. I quickly thought about what I could do. Still shivering, I climbed out of bed and opened the door. I was met by the sight of snow covering everything I could see. Everything was covered by a layer of white. Luckily, from what I see, my minions weren't affected at all by the temperature. I definitely was though. As the ice-cold breeze brushed against my body, I swiftly slammed the door. What am I meant to do here? I decided to look through my crafting menu to see if there was anything I could craft to make this easier. I still had to carefully manage my resources, however. From what I could see, there wasn't really anything craftable that I'd be able to place in the hut. With no other choice, I looked at the Grand Exchange. A Grand Exchange. Search, related, heat, order, top. 1. X1, portable solar-powered heater, cost, 59 tokens, seller, Joe Osborne. 2. X1, brick fireplace, cost 22 tokens, seller, Robert Eastwood. 3. X5, wool blanket, cost 12 tokens, seller, Jonathan Brown. 4. Not applicable. 5. Not applicable. There weren't a great deal of items on the exchange either. However, the main thing was that I was going to die if I didn't find some way to warm myself up. I assumed that there was a good chance that lots of people were buying heat-related items so they would run out if I hesitated. For quite a few tokens, I purchased the brick fireplace. It was the only way I could get heat inside of the hut without burning it down. As quick as I could, I made the purchase and the tokens were automatically transferred to him. In my inventory, my purchase appeared. I walked over to one side of the hut, still freezing from head to toe. I found a small place where I could place the brick fireplace, and at my command, it appeared. I quickly threw some wood inside and lit it. A few moments later, a small flame gradually grew into a bigger one before it was spreading heat throughout the hut. At times, the flashes of the fire made me worried that it'd burn the hut down. However, it looked like I was going to be safe for the most part. I spread my body in front of the opening in the brick fireplace and absorbed all of the heat that was blasting out. I stood like that for a long time, letting my body slowly warm up after what felt like the coldest I had ever been. It was like standing in the middle of Antarctica whilst soaked in water when I first woke up. As the fire gradually warmed me up, I was finally able to move my body around without vibrating like a Wii remote. As my mind cleared with actual thoughts, I began thinking about how I'd organize everything. At the moment, all of my minions were either farming, learning or standing around. I would go out and observe the outside, but at the moment, I wanted to feel the embrace of the fire for a little longer. The entire hut eventually began warming up and my body accepted walking around. I ever so slightly opened the door, and a wave of cold air instantly blasted inside like a jet engine. With no other choice, I decided to slide out through the small opening and look around. I was once again slowly becoming a block of ice as I stood outside my haven. From what I could see, the forest was much darker than usual. The sky was also quite dark. I wasn't sure if it was that I had somehow ended up sleeping in until late in the afternoon or if the sky was really just that dark. It was a grayish color, similar to that of a thunderstorm. However, there was no rain, only a slight bit of snow. I decided to send 5 scout minions into the forest to see how it goes. I had a strong feeling that the forest was basically out of reach since it appeared so dangerous. I wrote some code so that they would return as soon as they took damage. Minions were precious, so I really couldn't afford to lose any at the moment. On. If, hurt, return. I made sure that they stayed in a group and sent them off. With that, I also decided to rush back into the hut. I was starting to get frostbite in my hands and I was literally going to die of hypothermia if I stayed outside for one more minute. The infinitely comfortable warm air smashed into my body as I walked inside. It was like entering heaven, it was like entering God's lair after experiencing the worst of medieval torture, it was like taking a big shit after holding it in for 10 hours. My body instantly loosened, my skin untightened, my face relaxed, and my posture rested. I ran in front of the fireplace and let the warmth bath my entire body. I squirmed around a little bit before finally coming to my senses again. Well, I wasn't going to be leaving the hut from the looks of it. I wonder how other people were going. It was basically guaranteed death if you didn't have a house with heating in this temperature. I decided to have a quick look in my inventory. Vegetation/wood. X1197, wood. X100, leaves. X39, meat. X967, wheat. I wasn't really at risk of running out of wood at this rate. Basically, if all I wanted was to survive, the most important things I needed were food, water, and wood. If I had all those things and I didn't get overrun by zombies or have my hut burned down, I would at least be able to stay alive until the end of killer winter. Water was a slight issue since I couldn't go out and collect it. However, it generally was sold for pretty cheap on the Grand Exchange, so that wasn't exactly a big problem. There were probably lots of people who could produce water just by using their system, so just as a result of supply and demand, it was going to be quite cheap. I didn't have a great deal of food, but it was the one thing that I was guaranteed to collect every single day with my farming minions. At my current rate, with some increased efficiency from the minions leveling up, I was collecting around 3,000 wheat per day. This was definitely enough to feed me, but the main reason I needed to collect so much was that I needed to constantly sustain losses during the night. I would be able to minimize losses during the day simply by keeping all my minions on the settlement. However, at night, when zombies are guaranteed to attack, I would be all but guaranteed to lose minions as well. Even if I choose to fight cautiously, it would be impossible to keep losses at zero. This meant if I wasn't able to produce more minions than I was losing, I would slowly get whittled down until I eventually get overran. My elite minions with the minion leadership ability were able to train my combat minions during the day, meaning as long as they survive, they should technically get stronger and stronger. I continued to stand in front of the fire since I didn't really have much to do. I could organize and coordinate my minions from inside the hut. Well, I guess I had to. I wasn't able to stand outside of the hut for more than a few minutes without risking passing out. Suddenly, I heard a banging on the door of my hut. What on earth? What do you want? I shouted. It's me, Chloe. Chloe? I had chosen to leave her behind. Why was she here? She continued to bang on my door until I had no choice but to open it. As I opened the door, she quickly let herself inside. She collapsed to the ground as the heat slowly warmed her freezing body. William? I can't believe you ditched me like that. Well, it was the first time I was lost for words. I'm sorry, I realized that it was a mistake. I'm still mad at you. You're lucky that I would die if I tried to go somewhere else. My decision-making, everything, it's been broken since I've known it. I always struggle to make rational decisions. No matter how much I try to act logical, I always seem to be one step behind. Chloe sat in front of the fireplace, not turning to look at me. After a short moment of silence, she finally spoke. William, am I just a tool to you? She asked. It was true. The first time I ever decided to let her into the settlement, my only thought was to use her as a tool. However, as we've spent together, I've slowly come to learn that my way of thinking is indeed flawed. Chloe's past. I wandered around the park, underneath the bold lavender-purple sky. The streetlights were only semi-functional, so most of the light was provided by nearby buildings. The surroundings were filled with plentiful shadows, yet the shape of the landscape was still clear as day. Why do some people have so much more sensitivity for violence? Laying strewn up against the wall was a relatively young delinquent. A gentle stream of blood was flowing from his nostrils. His dirted cloth-like clothing was lathered with dirt and grass. It was mostly my doing. It wasn't like I was purposely picking a fight though. He attacked me first. It was simply self-defense. People like that only listen to violence, so that was how I decided to communicate with him. Yat, a monster. Maybe I was. Night was swiftly incoming, most would probably retreat back to their homes, but I found the nighttime atmosphere pleasant. The glimmering moonlight reflected off the water, the dark shaded trees and the silence in the air were all delectable. It was a good time to sit back and relax. Well, I guess I never really tried that hard at anything in the first place. I walked closer to the bank of the large clear pond beside the park. It was quite well kept, quite the contrast to the playground equipment. It was like its own separate environment. As my feet traveled along the softer, squishier dirt, I listened out for a particular sound. It was a sound I was familiar with around these places. The tender noise filled my ears until he was back. Persistence was a notion that was widely praised in this modern era, yet sometimes, it might just be better to give up. I had purposely left his injuries minor, in the hopes that this incident wouldn't get escalated. Well, he left me no choice now. It was always those who were all too eager to get in a fight that were the easiest to defeat. His movements were slow, like molasses, or maybe like a snail. It didn't really matter that much, it was easy enough to move my body out of the way of his punches. In return, I clenched my fist and hit him in the face with a little more power than last time. There was a slight cracking sensation before, once again, with a splatter of mud, he was on the ground. The deep red liquid coming out of his nose had just about covered half of his face. He looked like a vampire who had just had lunch, except all of the blood was his own. A little bit of it also stained the front of my fist. I decided to wipe it off with the sleeve of my shirt, which was not very pleasant, but there wasn't much else I could have done. His consciousness seemed to be slowly fading away. It was quite the pitiful scene, especially for someone who was so vigorously trying to attack me just moments prior. He didn't even try to get out one last quip before passing out. I'm not a good person. Well, I wouldn't exactly say I'm a terrible person either. I don't exactly go around picking fights with people over little accidents, but then again, can I really say that I'm any better than those people? It's more that I lack the interest to do so than any actual goodwill. I fight with no regard for the other person when conflict does arise. A good person would find some way to settle it peacefully, right? Oh well, I wouldn't know. I had just about had enough of the park. The sky was nearing black, like a monster finally closing its jaws. The moon peeked its head from behind the dark fog of clouds, sitting all alone in the sky. I made my way towards the road. A scarce stream of cars went by, illuminating the metallic playground equipment for a brief moment. It was about time I left. In the middle of the dark road, there stood the silhouette of a young girl. She seemed to show no regard for her surroundings, simply staring into the distance. She reminded me of a cat. Her long dark hair flowed as the gentle breeze brushed against it, swaying in the wind. It was an unusual sight, but there was no reason for me to interfere with what she was doing. For a brief moment, our eyes met. For some reason, she seemed to be intrigued. Unexpectedly, she started walking toward me. "You're one of us, aren't you?" She was looking up at me with her dark scarlet eyes, now less than an arm's length away. My senses were covered by a pure yet intense perfume. She seemed to be wearing a uniform from one of the nearby schools. "What do you mean?" I replied. Without hesitation, she grabbed my shoulder. "You have one, don't you?" she insisted. She violently pulled up my sleeve, exposing my arm. Her hand gripped onto my arm, holding it still. I could have resisted, but I knew what she was looking for, and she wouldn't be able to find it. She stared at the shoulder, now that my sleeve had been completely pulled up. What's up?" I asked. She appeared to be quite shocked at the revelation. "Sorry, never mind." After seeing an absence of something on my arm, she quickly lost interest. However, I could tell she was still somewhat suspicious of me. Eventually, she turned around, her black hair swaying in the wind. "It's fine, my life was dictated by hate anyways. William, I wonder, can you change me? I never really wanted to be like this. You're a terrible person. But I'm also a terrible person. Maybe, if we stay by each other for long enough, both of us could change?" My arms were slowly warming up as I stuck them just centimeters away from the fire. "Chloe, I'm sorry for ditching you. It's fine. I can't exactly say I've always had the nicest intentions either, William." I couldn't really tell how late it was getting. The two of us stood in front of the fire, letting its warm arms hug us tightly. There wasn't really much that I could do. At this point in time, I had exactly 92 tokens remaining. The fireplace was a pretty significant purchase, although it was definitely a necessary one. Chloe still wasn't looking at me. She was facing down, admiring the irregular movements of the flame. I couldn't see her face, but I could tell that she was upset. I'm not a good person. As time went on, the hut began to warm up, to the point where one couldn't really feel the chilliness of killer winter anymore, at least whilst inside this haven. "William." Yes. I'm hungry. She was finally looking toward me, however, her eyes were still partially hidden behind her long hair. Following her request, I decided to take some meat out of my inventory. I wonder if I can cook with the fireplace. I guess I could, I just needed to get something to put it on. I've got a pan, she stated. Ah, alright. She placed it on top of the flame and I placed some ingredients inside. We still lacked anything to add flavor to the food. I considered buying some spices off of the Grand Exchange, but token saving was more important. As the bottom of the pan began turning red, I took a seat on the ground. It was awkward. It was hard to speak to Chloe. I could hear the wind blowing against the side of the hut as the food slowly cooked. My minions were at work outside, gathering what little resources I was able to produce. I couldn't help but wonder how other humans were going at this time. I decided to scroll through the Grand Exchange when I noticed something interesting that caught my eye. It was something called a wood generator. From what it sounded like, it would appear to make resources without any input. I sorted the offers to see what generators were for sale. A Grand Exchange. Search, generator, order, top. 1, X1, iron generator, 165 tokens. 2, X2, greater wood generator, 50 tokens. 3, X5, stone generator, 40 tokens. 4, X3, wood generator, 35 tokens. 5, X2, wood generator, 25 tokens. Considering that generators were passive income, I assumed that most of these people were struggling with tokens to such a point where they needed immediate relief. From my understanding, if I simply invested in a generator, it would slowly pay for itself. However, I was quite unsure of how efficient a generator really was. The cheapest generator I could find was a single wood generator being sold for 18 tokens. The offer above that was a sale of 2 wood generators for 25 tokens. Above that was 3 wood generators for 35 tokens. It was somewhat of a risk, but at this rate, I would need to make some big changes if I ever wanted to improve my situation. Chloe, how many tokens do you have? I asked. She didn't respond. It was probably best to leave her alone for a little. As I continued to think about the value of the generators, I heard Chloe mutter something. I've got 56 tokens, and I can get more with my system. With our accumulated wealth, it would be worth the risk. I spent 35 tokens to purchase 3 wood generators. The generators suddenly appeared in my inventory. As I held the blueprint in my hand, I saw that it was quite a small mechanism. I could fit all 3 in the corner of the hut. As I placed them down, they stacked on top of each other like little boxes. When I walked closer, I saw some text. Currently producing 1 wood/hour. Use, enhancement agent? Ah, so it really wasn't worth it. At that rate, even with the 3 of them, I'd only be making 3 wood per hour. If I directly converted those into tokens, I would be getting 0.03 tokens per hour, which means it'd pay itself back in just under 2 months. However, there was something that intrigued me. Apparently, I would be able to add some of my enhancement agents, which I gathered during the previous fight against the cloaks. Luckily, I had 94. At first, I added 1 enhancement agent. Currently producing 1.5 wood/hour. Hold on, this was quite a significant upgrade. I added another. Currently producing 2 wood/hour. I added all the rest of my enhancement agents. Currently producing 48 wood/hour. Holy moly. For a normal person, such an investment in generators would be almost always a bad idea, especially during killer winter, where having spare tokens and immediate tokens was critical. However, with the addition of my enhancement agents, I was producing wood at a rapid pace. I could only put the enhancement agents on 1 generator, but even so, my wood production was at 50 wood/hour, which was equivalent to a token every 2 hours. It would pay back its purchase price in around 2 or 3 days. I was also gathering around 3,200 wheat per day, with increased efficiency and experience, so my settlement was slowly getting more and more self-sufficient. Once I achieve full economic freedom, I'll finally be able to make moves in order to move up the leaderboard. Now that the generators had been set up, I decided to look into what else I could invest in. At the moment, I probably should make more minions. It was the simplest and most obvious way of improving my standing. The main issue was, even if I decided to craft more minions, they would most likely be obsolete. I wasn't able to send them out on expeditions due to killer winter, and the scouts I sent out before never returned. P. Advanced System Controls. Resource Division, 121 minions. 3x Woodcutter Minion. 11x Miner Minion. 22x Scout Minion, Mining. 25x Scout Minion, Woodcutting. 33x Scout Minion, Resource Gathering. 6x Scout Minion, hunting. 1x Scout Minion, farming. 20x Scout Minion. Combat Division, 52 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 20x Scout Minions, swordplay. 22x Scout Minions, archery. 8x Scout Minion, combat. Utility Division, 24 minions. 13x Builder Minion. 10x Scout Minion, utility. 1x Minion Manager. I might craft some more at the end of the day. It was important that I kept my army large enough to convincingly pass the night. My Minion Manager made its way to me. I've got the end of day report. End of day report. Total resources gathered. X3198, wheat. Other. Not applicable. Well, I guess my reports were going to be looking like this for the time being. With 3198 wheat on me, I decided to look at how I was going to distribute it. Simple conversion. 100 wheat-5 apples. 200 wheat-1 meat. Logically, if I could obtain meat through alternative means, I'd be able to craft minions more efficiently. With the amount I had, I could make around 30 scout minions if I could get meat from somewhere else. I decided to have a look on the Grand Exchange to see if anyone was selling it. A Grand Exchange. Search, meat, order, best value. 1, X76, meat, cost, 7 tokens, seller, Angus Howson. 2, X9, meat, cost 1 token, seller, Robert Eastwood. 3, X187, meat, cost 23 tokens, seller, Patrick Mulder. 4, X26, meat, cost 3 tokens, seller, Patrick Mulder. 5, X32, meat, cost 4 tokens, seller, Patrick Mulder. There were quite a few offers for only meat. The current shop value of meat for me was 200 wheat each, which was twice as much as the apples needed to craft 1 minion. If I bought meat from the shop, I would only need to expend 100 wheat to craft a scout minions instead of 300 wheat if I also converted it into meat. At the moment, I figured that I'd just buy the meat from the 2 best value deals. In total, I purchased 85 meat for 8 tokens. With that, I had enough meat to craft quite a few minions. I spent 3,000 wheat crafting 150 apples. I then crafted as many scout minions as I could, totaling 30 scout minions. I now had to program them. Before, I let my Minion Manager do the programming. However, I decided that it'd be better if I focused more specifically on which ones to make. I now had 30 new scout minions. My most important mission was to stay alive. This meant that I'd need to defend myself against the zombie horde at night. All of my farms were at capacity, so I decided that I'd specialize them all in combat. Advanced System Controls. Resource Division, 121 minions. 3x Woodcutter Minion. 11x Miner Minion. 22x Scout Minion, mining. 25x Scout Minion, woodcutting. 33x Scout Minion, resource gathering. 6x Scout Minion, hunting. 1x Scout Minion, farming. 20x Scout Minion. Combat Division, 82 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 20x Scout Minions, swordplay. 22x Scout Minions, archery. 8x Scout Minion, combat. 30x Scout Minions. Utility Division, 26 minions. 13x Builder Minion. 10x Scout Minion, utility. 2x Basic Scout Minion. 1x Minion Manager. At the same time, I paused all of the learning that my minions were doing. I have been somewhat putting it off recently, but I actually wanted to focus on the specializations a bit more. I took a moment to think about all of the learning stages. Learning, Stage 1. Combat. Resource gathering. Utility. Then after that, in the combat specialization, there were several more choices. Learning, Stage 2. Archery. Swordplay. Magic. Shield/utility. I still haven't learned what happens past this stage. I'd been mostly training my minions in archery and swordplay in the past since they were simple to understand and easy to manage. It was a decent idea when I had a large, almost never-ending supply of minions. However, now, I needed to make each individual minion as powerful as possible. Combat Division, 82 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 20x Scout Minions, swordplay. 22x Scout Minions, archery. 8x Scout Minion, combat. 30x Scout Minions. I hadn't even replaced Knight with a stronger minion yet. I had a look at every single variation for the combat Scout Minions. Firstly, I looked at the third stage of swordplay. Learning, Stage 3. Takes 5 days to learn, can only train one, Stage 3, of any minion at a time. Sword Saint. Silent Killer. Berserker. They all sounded very interesting. although the 5-day training time was somewhat problematic, although it'd probably be worth it. I guess I'd have to slowly get stage 3s. Then, I looked at the 3rd stage of archery. Learning, stage 3. Takes 5 days to learn, can only train one stage 3 of any minion at a time. Archery Saint. Sharpshooter. Magic Archer. Those were the 2 main stage 3s I wanted to look at. There were quite a few choices, but at the moment, I decided to train a sharpshooter first. I wanted a stronger archer to take over as knight since I only have a basic archery scout minion at the moment. I set it up and the archer minion began learning. It'd be 5 days until it was done. In the meantime, I also wanted to reorganize the rest of my army. I currently had 8 combat scout minions which were not yet specialized. I decided to specialize them all in magic. I hadn't tested that line out yet, so I might find out that it is quite good. It'd take a few hours for them to develop. Now, I needed to organize the free scout minions. Without much else to think about, I simply made them all learn combat. With that, I had basically reorganized my entire army. I was still sitting on my bed in the comfort of the warm fireplace. I needed a way to stay warm whilst I ventured outside, otherwise I'd be basically stuck inside this hut for the entirety of winter. My first thought was to get some warmer clothes, although clothes seem to be in high demand and low supply in this apocalypse. Especially now, since everyone was likely trying to buy warm clothes, it was likely going to be both expensive and difficult to find some. Aside from that, I also considered warming the area around me up. If I could somehow barricade my settlement, I could technically try to find some way to conserve the heat in here. It would also provide me with some protection against the zombies. For some reason, I had never thought of building a wall until now. However, now that I thought about it, a wall would be very useful. The only problem was that it wasn't going to be easy to build a massive wall around this entire settlement. However, with the help of my minions, it was definitely possible.
Thank you so much. Visit us more for more novels, please. Like, subscribe to our channel.